Chapter 901. That person? Which person? Chu Luiwei was taken aback for a moment. Jiang Yuqing looked at her expression and suddenly understood something. It seemed like she still didn't remember. This made his mood a little better. Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes, and a guess suddenly surfaced in her mind. Jiang Yuqing seemed to know about her memory loss. But just as she was about to ask, Jiang Yuqing's figure suddenly moved, and he quickly went forward. He was at the peak of Tier 7. Even though he was injured, the power that burst out in an instant was still not to be underestimated. A silver light flashed past. It was him who had summoned his own long sword, and was about to clash with the long yuan sword. A murderous intent flashed past Chu Luiwei's eyes, and she raised her wrist. Clang! The two long swords collided fiercely. Crack! A crisp shattering sound was heard. Jiang Yuqing's sword was directly split into two from the middle by the long yuan sword. This sword was actually a yuan instrument that Jiang Yuqing had collected, and it could be considered an excellent sword. Unfortunately, compared to the long yuan sword, it was far inferior and was directly broken in one exchange. However, Jiang Yuqing's face didn't show any signs of panic. Instead, he took advantage of the moment when the long sword was broken to quickly step forward. He directly grabbed Chu Luiwei's neck with one hand. Chu Luiwei could clearly see that a purplish-black mark seemed to appear on his hand. A dangerous aura was rapidly approaching. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Yuqing was already half a step away from Chu Luiwei. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. He had already reached the step, but he still hadn't given up and instead chose to directly attack the princess. The long yuan sword's power was indeed extremely strong, but Jiang Yuqing's attack came too quickly. It was also too sudden. Your Highness. Worried voices sounded from all around. However, the time was too short, and the bystanders didn't have time to help. Jiang Yuqing's hand was about to choke Chu Luiwei's neck. Chu Luiwei tiptoed and quickly dodged. At the same time, a transparent flame suddenly gushed out from her palm and quickly wrapped around her body. The blazing heat caused Jiang Yuqing's eyebrows to fiercely jump. Seeing the transparent flames on Chu Luiwei's body, that familiar burning sensation suddenly came. While he was distracted, Chu Luiwei had already dodged his attack. She lifted her leg and kicked out, sending Jiang Yuqing flying. Crack! The sound of his sternum breaking was exceptionally clear. Bang! Jiang Yuqing crashed to the ground. He was already injured, and now that he was hit by Chu Luiwei, his injuries were even worse. However, he couldn't care less about his injuries. He struggled to look at Chu Luiwei in shock. You were the one who attacked me that day. You are the disguised Shimu. He didn't feel it before, but now that he was in close combat, he suddenly realized that ruthless and straightforward figure was too familiar. Chu Luiwei curled her lips into a smile. You guessed right. A strong sense of uneasiness surged in Jiang Yuqing's heart. He reached out to touch his chest, as if wanting to take something out. However, Chu Luiwei didn't give him the chance. She stared intently at Jiang Yuqing and shouted clearly, "Explode!" As soon as she finished speaking, Jiang Yuqing felt as if a flame had suddenly surged into his energy center. It was extremely painful. Previously, his lower abdomen had been aching from time to time, but he didn't take it to heart. Now, he was shocked to realize that this energy had actually burned into his energy center. No. As soon as he spoke, he felt a crazy and terrifying energy explode in his energy center. Boom. His core of essence shattered. His energy center was destroyed. The intense pain caused Jiang Yuqing's vision to turn white. He almost fainted. The force that he had used all kinds of methods to store began to run wildly because he lost control. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before anyone could react, Jiang Yuqing was already lying on the ground, covered in blood and in a sorry state. A fist-sized bloody hole appeared in his lower abdomen. The muscles all over his body had also cracked to varying degrees due to the impact of the force in his body. Bloody scars covered his body, looking extremely terrifying. Jiang Yuqing was already unconscious. Blood splattered into his eyes, making his vision blood red. He lay on the ground, unable to tell which part of his body hurt more. So, it really was her. From then on, no, perhaps even before that she had already planned all of this. The transparent flame quickly spread around Jiang Yuqing's body. Chu Luiyue looked down at him and tilted her head. How does this feel? They should also experience the bone-piercing pain that she had experienced back then. Jiang Yuqing wanted to use his force to form a barrier to defend against the attack of the transparent flame. However, this fire seed had been hiding in his body for a long time and had directly erupted from the inside out. How could he defend against it? In addition to the damage to his core of essence, he was no different from a cripple now. Jiang Lizhua watched this scene from the side, his heart aching to the extreme. But just now, everyone had clearly seen that it was Jiang Yuqing who took the initiative to attack the Empress concubine. In this situation, even death could not wipe out his crimes. How could he dare to plead for leniency or say another word? Jiang Lizhua was in a daze. Thinking that the entire Jiang family would be completely finished from now on, his heart was filled with grief. His blood and qi churned, and his eyes rolled back as he fainted. The black cavalry immediately came forward and brought him away. The scene in front of him was extremely chaotic, but to a certain extent, it was also orderly. Anyone with discerning eyes could see that the Empress concubine's people had already made complete preparations. Everything that happened today was under her control. Jiang Yuqing rolled on the ground in agony, trying to extinguish the flames on his body. But how could the karmic fire consecrated in the heavenly square cauldron be so easily extinguished? Jiang Yuqing could even hear the sizzling sounds coming from the blood stains on his body as they burned. His skin, flesh, blood, and bones were all being tortured horribly. Finally, Jiang Yuqing spat out a few words with difficulty. If you want to kill me, just do it. Chu Luiyue suddenly waved her hand. The transparent flame seemed to have received some kind of order and quickly gathered, finally forming a small ball. Then, it rose into the air and jumped onto Chu Luiyue's palm. If one didn't look carefully, it was really hard to recognize the transparent flame that jumped like a fairy. Then, Chu Luiyue raised her sword and with a flick of the sword, she cut a bloody wound on Jiang Yuqing's chest. Without waiting for Jiang Yuqing to react, she flicked her finger and planted the flame into Jiang Yuqing's heart. Don't worry, I can't bear to kill you now. Chu Luiyue curved her lips into a smile. In the future, with this flame accompanying you, you shouldn't be lonely. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 902. From now on, Jiang Yuqing would suffer endless heartburning pain day and night. His pill of essence had been destroyed, so he could only passively endure this kind of torture. She had said that she would make these people pay back the pain she had suffered 1,000 times over. And today was just the beginning. Jiang Yuqing seemed to want to say something, but the intense pain forced him to curl up and struggle. He lay on the ground, covered in blood, as lowly as an ant. Who would have thought that the high and mighty Jiang Yuqing would end up in such a state? Chu Luiyue looked away, raised her head slightly, and wanted to walk forward. Her feet were stained with blood, and every step she took left a bloody footprint. It was a ghastly sight. Countless gazes were focused on her. She was slender and had thin shoulders, but her aura was stern and majestic, and she was unstoppable. She walked step by step to the top of the 9 steps and looked at Shangguanyu. Father, I didn't discuss today's matter with you. I hope you can forgive me. Although Qi Han and Jian Fengqi had teamed up previously, and they had vaguely guessed something, she didn't tell anyone what happened afterward. Shangguanyu shook his head and raised his hand. The Tianling scepter seemed to be summoned and flew into his hand. The next moment, Shangguanyu handed the Tianling scepter to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked. Today, I officially pass the throne of the Tianling dynasty to you. From today onwards, you are the new emperor of Tianling. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth, but Shangguanyu continued. From now on, you can do whatever you want. No one in the world can hurt you anymore. Originally, this position belonged to her. No one in the entire Tianling dynasty was more suitable than her. After Shangguanyu knew what had happened back then, he was actually very regretful. If he had passed the throne to her earlier, Shangguan Wan and the others wouldn't have been able to covet it, and perhaps there wouldn't have been so much trouble later. Now that she had finally returned safely, and with Taizu's help, everything was logical. Seeing the pity in Shangguan Yu's eyes, Chu Liwei felt a surge of warmth in her heart, and tears welled up in her eyes. She paused and finally took the Tianling scepter with both hands. In an instant, the Tianling scepter emitted a dazzling light that shot into the sky. The pressure was immense. The officials knelt down. Congratulations to the crown princess on the throne. Amidst the blood, that woman had stepped through life and death to return once more. Chu Liu's chest seemed to be filled with excitement. Now I'm the crown emperor. Today was supposed to be the day of the third princess, Shangguan Wan's wedding and coronation. However, when the news came out of the palace, everyone was shocked. In an instant, it caused a huge uproar in the entire West Hill. It turns out that the princess died back then because Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing colluded to frame her. They were the reason why the emperor was unconscious for 2 years. Jiang Yuqing was the mastermind behind the destruction of the Chongshu Pavilion overnight. More importantly, the crown princess didn't die. After exposing the crimes they had committed back then, the situation in the entire Tianling dynasty changed drastically. The Xiahou residents and Jiang residents were executed. Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing's cultivation bases were crippled, their bones broken, and they were imprisoned. The deputy general of the Black Cavalry, Mu Qinghe, was demoted and placed under house arrest in the Mu residence. Other than that, many people were implicated and were completely dealt with together. It could be said that after this battle, half of the Tianling imperial court was bathed in blood. On the same day, the crown princess was officially registered as the empress. Overnight, the situation in the Tianling dynasty changed. Because of these things, the outside world was in an uproar. However, because the crown princess had an extremely high prestige in the Tianling dynasty, after knowing the truth, everyone quickly chose to accept it. In fact, most people thought that the crown princess was much better than Shangguan Wan to be able to return and ascend to the throne. However, they didn't expect that Chu Liwei was actually the crown princess. Because of this, it wasn't that no one questioned her bloodline, but because Taizu had already appeared, no one dared to say anything. The entire Tianling dynasty was created by Taizu, so who dared to refute his words? Therefore, after a lot of trouble, there weren't any objections, and all kinds of disputes quickly subsided. As for the matter of Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing colluding to harm the crown princess, it attracted many people's reprimand and insults. Of course, Shangguan Wan and Jiang Yuqing wouldn't know about this. Shangguan Wan was placed under house arrest in Huayang Palace, and Jiang Yuqing? After seeing the Jiang family being executed with his own eyes the next day, he was also detained in Huayang Palace, but he didn't live in the same room as Shangguan Wan. After all, they were husband and wife. Chu Liwei felt that it wasn't good to break them up. It was quite good to become a pair of distressed mandarin ducks. The handling of the various people in the palace took a full 3 days. The thick smell of blood was everywhere, and it didn't completely dissipate until a few days later. However, Chu Liwei left these matters to the 13yu Palace, and she quickly took over many of the matters in the imperial court. Because the changes were too big and involved a lot of people, there were many things that she needed to deal with personally. Fortunately, she was used to doing these things in the past, so it wasn't difficult for her to get started now. Soon she tidied up everything. On this day, she finally heaved a sigh of relief after reviewing the last bit of memorials. Just as she was about to go out, she happened to see Shangguan Yu pacing back and forth outside the door, as if he was hesitating about something. "Father, why are you here?" Shangguan Yu turned around when he heard the voice. After a few days of rest, Shangguan Yu's complexion was much better. However, he seemed to be a little hesitant. Imperial father has something to ask you." "Father, just say it." Chu Liwei smiled. What's the matter that made father react like this? Logically speaking, he shouldn't have anything to worry about now. Shangguan Yu coughed and carefully glanced at Chu Liwei. He hesitated for a moment before he finally asked. After hesitating for a while, he finally said, "This?" I heard that you already has a fiancé in country Yaochen? Digression, a crippled February floated by. Update at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 903. Chu Luiyue didn't expect her father to come here for this matter. She couldn't help but smile and nod. Where did Imperial Father hear this news? Shangguan Yu didn't expect her to admit it so frankly. He was slightly surprised. Oh, I happened to have a chat with Elder Song the day before. Everyone in the Chongshu Pavilion knew of Rong Xiu's existence. After all, they had visited him in person and given him a lot of gifts. It was difficult to forget. Chu Luiyue had been busy dealing with the affairs of the imperial court these days and hadn't had time to have a good chat with Yuchi Song and the others. She didn't intend to hide it, so she nodded. I see. I didn't want to hide this from you, but I've been too busy recently, so I didn't have time to tell you. Shangguan Yu felt a little relieved. Looking at his daughter's frankness, it should be okay. Then, how is he? I heard that he is the Prince of Yaochen called Rong Xiu, right? How old is he this year? How is his cultivation? Most importantly, how does he treat you? Shangguan Yu couldn't hold back and asked all the questions in his heart. Chu Luiyue glanced at him faintly. Father, you didn't come here today to see me, but to ask about Rong Xiu, right? Shangguan Yu was embarrassed for a moment when his thoughts were exposed. However, this was related to his favorite daughter's marriage after all, so he was naturally cautious and cautious. You can say that. After all, he is your fiancé, but I haven't even seen him yet. With Jiang Yuqing as an example, Shangguan Yu was now like a frightened bird. He was afraid that Chu Luiyue would encounter a bad person again. What happened 2 years ago, he didn't want it to happen again. Chu Luiyue saw that although he pretended to be calm, his eyes were full of nervousness and worry. How could she not know what he was thinking? She felt a little warm in her heart. Her red lips curled up and she nodded seriously. He is very good and he treats me very well. Shangguan Yu carefully observed her expression. When she mentioned Rong Xiu, she looked calm, her eyes were bright, and there was a spring breeze between her eyebrows. That was clearly the expression of someone who liked someone very much. He had never seen such an expression on her face before. Even in the past, when she took the initiative to come and say that she wanted to set up a marriage contract with Jiang Yuqing, he didn't. After all, Shangguan Yu had lived for half his life, and as an emperor, he was very good at guessing people's hearts. With one look, I can tell that my precious daughter has feelings for Rong Xiu. Shangguan Yu breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, but there was also a faint trace of worry. On one hand, he had always been worried that after experiencing the double betrayal of Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan Yu's mental defense would greatly increase and she would reject everyone. On the other hand, he was also afraid that this Rong Xiu might not be able to give you the best happiness. She had already suffered too much. He didn't want her to suffer even a little more pain. In that case, now that many things in West Hill have been solved, why don't we find a time to invite him to West Hill? Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. It was normal for his father to want to see his son-in-law. After all, it was not the first time he had been here. Now that the dust had settled, it was time for her to tell him her true identity. Hearing Chu Luiyue's words, Shangguan Yu nodded, but still seemed to be a little hesitant. Chu Luiyue came closer with some doubts. Father, what else do you want to ask? Shangguan Yu immediately denied. No. Chu Luiyue looked at him lazily, with a face full of understanding. Shangguan Yu was a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, he asked in a low voice, in fact, it's not a big deal, but I just heard that Rong Xiu doesn't seem to be in good health. Chu Luiyue almost burst out laughing. You haven't been here for a few days. Have you secretly investigated Rong Xiu's background? Shangguan Yu was exposed in front of him, and he was embarrassed and blushed. I'm also worried about you, so I asked in private. Country Yaochen was far away from Heaven's Canopy, but Shangguan Yu could still inquire about some relevant information. However, what he heard didn't make him feel at ease. Everything else was fine, but his physique seemed to be a disease in his mother's womb, and he had never been in good health. Shang Guanyu couldn't help but feel worried. Chu Luiyue finally couldn't help but laugh, and his eyes curved. Don't worry, his talent and cultivation are not inferior to mine. In fact, he is even stronger than mine. Everything else was just a rumor. Shang Guanyu was shocked at first, but then he frowned slightly and didn't seem to believe it. Even if you want to speak up for him, you don't have to be so exaggerated. Even in the entire West Hill, there might not be anyone more outstanding than you, let alone Country Yaochen. It wasn't that he looked down on Country Yaochen, but compared to the Tianling dynasty, it was indeed very small. Chu Luiyue shook his head and said sincerely, if you don't believe me, you will naturally know when he comes. In fact, she and Rong Xiu did have some unknown issues between them. For example, her identity as the crown princess, and his identity as the son of God. Seeing how confident Chu Luiyue was, Shang Guanyu was skeptical, but he still nodded in agreement. Don't worry. As long as he is as outstanding as you say, I will definitely support you. As for the rest, you don't have to worry about it. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Rest? What rest? Shang Guanyu's eyelids twitched and he said vaguely, no. Nothing. Ahem just. You see, now that you have returned safely and directly become the emperor, the courtiers are quite concerned about your marriage. Shang Guanyu glanced at her carefully. You also know that many young talents in West Hill City are. Lord Zhao's second son hasn't married because of you. And the Sun family has been asking to see you for a few days. Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched fiercely. What the hell is going on? I haven't even settled down on the throne, and they are already putting my marriage on the agenda? But there's no need to be so anxious. How can there be no hurry? There are so many emperors in the Tianling dynasty, and most of them were already married when they ascended to the throne. Some of them were married on the day they ascended to the throne, and the worst ones were also engaged. Only now that you are engaged, they don't know much about it, but even if they know. Shang Guanyu didn't finish his words, but Chu Luiyue knew what he meant. Even if they knew that she was engaged to Rong Xiu, they probably wouldn't like her. Born in a small empire outside heaven's canopy, even if he was a prince, in their eyes, he was definitely not worthy of Chu Luiyue, who was now the emperor of Tianling. At the same time, in the Pingliang Square outside West Hill City, a tall figure had just walked out of the transmission array. He was wearing a hood, and his face was hidden, so no one could see him clearly. There were people coming and going around, but not many people paid attention to him. He looked up at the majestic and quaint West Hill City in front of him and suddenly sneezed. Rong Xiu rubbed his nose and murmured in a low voice. His nasal voice sounded particularly lazy. Who is scolding me? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 904. Chu Luiyue, who was still in the palace, did not know about the news of Rong Xiu's arrival in the West Hill. After comforting her father with great difficulty, she went straight to the Huayang Palace. The once bustling Huayang Palace was now deserted. Apart from the Black Cavalry, who were strictly guarding the inside and outside, there was not even a palace servant to serve. Chu Luiyue walked straight into the main hall of the Huayang Palace. After entering the room, she was hit by an unpleasant smell. The whole room was a mess and extremely dirty. And in the pile of rubbish, she could barely see a person lying down. It was Shang Guanyu. Because there was no one to take care of her injuries, they repeatedly festered and festered. But every day, Qi Han would specially come over and feed her an elixir to keep her alive. In this way, she could not die or fall into a coma. She could only bear this terrible torture with a clear mind. There was no distinction between day and night, and there was no end to it. Hearing the sound, Shang Guanyu thought that Qi Han had come, and she did not move. Anyway, she did not have the strength to struggle. She could only live like this every day. After these few days of torment, she no longer had any thoughts in her heart. Her only thought was that she would be lucky one day and die directly. Looks like you're doing well. A familiar voice sounded. Shang Guanyu was shocked. She looked up in horror and realized that the person who came was actually Chu Luiyue. Today, she was wearing a simple and elegant white dress. Her black hair was like clouds, and she only wore a peach blossom hairpin on her head. At a glance, she looked pure and noble. She was lovely and moving. Who would have thought that such a person would use such cruel means to force her, Shangguan, into such a hopeless situation? The surrounding filth seemed to have nothing to do with her. She stood there as if she was high and mighty. Shangguan knew that she was back. She was really back. What are you doing here? Shangguan struggled to spit out a sentence, but it was weak. Chu Luiyue smiled faintly. This consort is here to ask you, who exactly was the soul that escaped that day? What was its relationship with you, and how much did it help you? Shangguan was silent for a while. I can tell you, but if I do, you have to promise me that you'll kill me. She really couldn't continue living like this. Chu Luiyue raised her brows, and a smile appeared in her eyes. Do you think you still have the qualifications to negotiate with me? If you want to say it, then say it. If you don't want to say it, I have plenty of time to wait. After saying that, she turned around, as if intending to leave just like that. Seeing how straightforward she was, Shangguan also panicked. Wait, I'll tell you now. As if she was afraid that Chu Luiyue would go back on his word, she took a deep breath and said everything she wanted to say. I also don't know when that person appeared in my body. I also don't know who he is. All these years, he was the one who instigated me to do those things. Back then, he was also the one who hinted to me to harm you. And the method to repair your Yuan meridian? Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment. Back then, when you attacked those people in Dahuang Swamp, he was the one who taught you? In that case, he was already hostile to me, so he manipulated you to do those things? That's right. If it wasn't for him, I definitely wouldn't have the guts. I swear. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment as many thoughts flashed through her mind. Seeing Shangguan like this, what she said should be true. She had deliberately locked her up and left her out for a few days to torture her. On one hand, she wanted her to repay the debt from back then. On the other hand, she wanted to push her to the brink of collapse so that she would tell the truth. At this point, there was no need for her to lie. It seemed that she wouldn't be able to get anything out of her in this regard. Chu Luiyue was a little disappointed. That person was very powerful. It was also within her expectations that Shangguan would be controlled by him. Perhaps she didn't know that person as well as the Taizu did. Was it your idea to attack me, or Jiang Yuqing's? Chu Luiyue changed the question. It was his idea. He came to me of his own accord and said that he liked me, and said that he wanted to be with me forever. Shangguan's voice gradually trembled as she spoke. She felt like a fool who had been played in the palm of Jiang Yuqing's hand without realizing it. Unfortunately, back then, she had secretly given her heart to Jiang Yuqing. How could she tell the truth from a lie? When he came to me, he had already started to poison you. From the beginning to the end, the one who wanted to kill you was Jiang Yuqing. Although I hate you, I don't have the means or the guts to do it. Speaking of which, I'm just his assistant at best. If you want to take revenge, just go and find him. With that said, Shangguan laughed at herself. It's ridiculous to say that in his study, there is a portrait of you from 10 years ago. From the day you became of marriageable age, he liked you. But in the end, didn't he still try to kill you? Chu Luiyue didn't say anything. She couldn't bear Jiang Yuqing's so-called love. But as for why he did this, she was afraid that she would have to find him and ask him personally to know. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue turned around and left. Shangguan hurriedly called out to her, wanting her to end herself, but Chu Luiyue's figure had already disappeared. In the end, Shangguan's voice was so hoarse that it almost bled. Gradually, she fainted again. Not long after, Qi Han came over and woke her up again. She had to endure the pain and torture that seemed to never stop. Chu Luiyue didn't care about everything that happened in the main hall. The 13th had been by her side for a long time, so she naturally helped her take care of many things. After leaving the door, she turned around and entered the side hall. Jiang Yuqing was among them. His situation wasn't much better than Shangguan's. But his mental state was much better than Shangguan's. Hearing the sound, he slowly turned his head. Seeing that familiar yet strange face, his heart moved slightly, and a wave of emotion rose in his eyes. Chu Luiwei didn't dress up today, but after regaining her identity, she didn't hide her aura anymore, adding a bit of coldness and nobility. Even if she was only wearing a simple long dress, she was still so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off her. Jiang Yuqing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he vaguely felt that Chu Luiwei seemed to be more and more similar to the Shangguan Yu of the past. In the past, there were only 20% of her facial features and 30% of her expression, so there was a total of 50% similarity. But now, the girl's gradually opened appearance had 70% of the charm of the past. Especially when Shangguan Yu was the same age back then, it was as if they were carved out of the same mold. In this world, could there really be two people who looked so similar? Or was it because the core inside had changed so they were more similar? Chu Luiwei didn't know what he was thinking at this time, so she went straight to the point. I'm here today to ask you something. Did I ever tell you to cancel the engagement? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 905. Jiang Yuqing's pupils constricted, and a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. After a moment he said, "No." Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Actually, on the night she revealed her identity and officially ascended the throne, she had a very long dream. The entire dream was fragmented, with only a few incoherent fragments. After waking up, she had forgotten most of it, only vaguely remembering a few scenes. Other than the octagonal pavilion by the cliff that she had seen at the beginning, there were many unfamiliar scenes in the dream. She had never been to those places, but for some reason, they felt very familiar. More importantly, she remembered the details of some of the scenes clearly. It was as if she had seen them before. After waking up, she tried to draw these scenes, but as soon as she picked up the brush, she almost completely forgot. She couldn't even draw a blurry outline. Other than the octagonal pavilion on the cliff, everything else became blurry. Other than that, the clearest was Thousand View Garden. She dreamed that she was standing by the lake, and Jiang Yuqing was standing in front of her. She seemed to have said something, and there were a few sensitive words. Engagement, cancellation, agreement. After waking up, Chu Luiwei thought for a long time. She felt that this dream wasn't completely a dream. There were many things in it that might be related to the part of her memories that she had lost. If all of that really happened before. I guess that I went to find Jiang Yuqing back then to cancel the marriage agreement. After waiting for a few days, she finally came here to see him and asked this question. But she didn't expect Jiang Yuqing to say that he didn't. Chu Luiwei didn't quite believe it. Really? Jiang Yuqing looked at her doubtful expression, and for some reason, a subtle smile suddenly appeared on his face. Now that things have come to this, why would I lie to you about such things? Back then, she indeed didn't mention canceling the engagement. Because at that time, they had just agreed to pick a time to set the engagement, but before they could do it, she found him again and proposed canceling the engagement. Because she said that she had someone she liked. But in the end, the engagement was still set. But that was in the future. For her to ask such a question, it was obvious that she couldn't remember what had happened back then at all. Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to explain, nor was he interested in repeating what had happened back then. After all, in his opinion, those experiences weren't worth recalling or remembering. Chu Luiwei stared at Jiang Yuqing, repeatedly thinking about the truth of his words. Yesterday, the Jiang family's residence was sealed. She suddenly changed the topic. Jiang Yuqing's face froze for a moment, but it was gone in the blink of an eye. Only a faint redness could be seen in his eyes. But his overall expression, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. In fact, he had already expected all of this from the moment he was escorted to watch the beheading of the Jiang clan 2 days ago. Or rather, from the day he decided to make a move on her, he had thought of such a situation. However, in the past, he had always been confident and thought that he would never fail. What was even more unexpected was that she actually came back alive. They all died because of you. Chu Luiwei looked at him. Your sister, Jiang Yuji, was still calling your name before she died. You should have heard it, right? The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead throbbed. Of course he heard it, and he heard it clearly. At that time, blood flowed all over the ground. The originally lively lives were all gone in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Jiang Yuqing slowly closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the emotions in his eyes had completely dissipated, leaving only coldness. The winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. This is your revenge on me. I'll just accept it. No matter how much he begged for mercy or tried to save himself, he was powerless to change the situation. Usurping the throne and committing all kinds of crimes. Not to mention Chu Luiwei, anyone related to this would not let him off easily. Moreover, his pill of essence was shattered, and he was covered in wounds. He was worse than an ordinary person. What else could he do except for anger and grief? However, all of this was actually useless. It would only cause him more pain. After becoming numb, he felt much better. Chu Luiwei smiled. Jiang Yuqing was rather open-minded. Or rather, he was cold and selfish enough. It was clearly because of him that thousands of people in the Jiang family were implicated. However, in the end, he didn't seem to have any remorse. That was because he didn't care about those people at all. Even if they were his parents and his biological sister, he still cared about himself the most, even though he felt a little heartache for them. If someone else was involved in this matter, they would have committed suicide long ago because they couldn't bear the pressure of self-blame and guilt. However, Jiang Yuqing didn't. From this perspective, he was indeed someone important. If he didn't have some temperament and capabilities, how could he have made all the preparations silently back then and betrayed me in one fell swoop? I found this in your study room. Chu Luiwei suddenly took out a rectangular wooden box. As he was worried that the Jiang family might have left something dangerous behind, Qin Yi also went with them during the search. After that, he sent this over. Upon seeing the wooden box, Jiang Yuqing's expression cracked for a moment. Chu Luiwei glanced at him, opened the wooden box, and took out a painting. With a light flick of his wrist, the painting instantly unfurled. There was a woman drawn on it. It was Shangguan Yu back then. Chu Luiwei was also a little shocked when he saw this painting. From the looks of this painting and the signature on it, it was drawn by Jiang Yuqing on the day of her coming-of-age ceremony back then. Previously, Shangguan Wan mentioned that Jiang Yuqing had missed her for 10 years. This was probably what she was referring to. Chu Luiwei half smiled. I didn't know that you would actually leave such a painting behind after what you did to me back then. Jiang Yuqing's face turned pale for a moment, as if someone had exposed his long-buried secret. A trace of embarrassment flashed across his eyes. He admitted that he liked her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to that marriage agreement back then. However, for some reason, this painting made him very embarrassed when she suddenly took it out like this. Don't worry. I'm not interested in your yearning for the past 10 years. Chu Luiwei spoke lazily, but his gaze was as sharp as a knife. What this consort wants to ask is, when exactly and why did you decide to betray this consort? In this world, there's no such thing as love or hatred for no reason. Chu Luiwei didn't really believe that Jiang Yuqing did this for the sake of the throne. If he married her, he would still be able to obtain the power he wanted. The more he liked her back then, the more it showed that this betrayal was filled with shocking temptation. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from AI. Net. Chapter 906. In the face of Chu Luiwei's questioning, Jiang Yuqing chose to remain silent. His mouth was tightly shut, and he refused to say anything. He even shifted his gaze and turned around, as if he didn't intend to continue chatting with Chu Luiwei. Snap. Chu Luiwei snapped her fingers. A cluster of crimson flames rose from between his fingers, and the painting was instantly set ablaze. Jiang Yuqing heard the commotion and suddenly turned around. When he saw this scene, the veins on his forehead throbbed fiercely. Since you refuse to speak, then there's no need to continue chatting. As for this painting, you should have burned it on the day you decided to kill this consort. Chu Luiwei's tone was cold and resolute. Seeing this painting would only make her feel more disgusted. Who was he pretending to be infatuated with her all these years? If he still had the slightest bit of sincerity, he wouldn't have done those things back then. Absurd, laughable. The painting was quickly devoured by the flames, and finally turned to ashes. When the last bit of starlight was extinguished, Jiang Yuqing's face flickered for a moment. He seemed to want to snatch the painting, but in the end he didn't do anything. Chu Luiwei gave him a meaningful look, then turned and left. After her figure disappeared, the room once again regained its deathly silence. Not long after, there was a burst of mournful and tragic cries coming from the main hall next to them. A trace of disgust appeared on Jiang Yuqing's face. It was Shangguan Wan's cry, as if it was time for her to be tortured again. Almost every day there would be such a cry. Without looking, it wasn't hard to imagine what kind of terrible pain the owner of this voice was going through. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a burning pain in his heart. His face paled and he slowly bent over. After dealing with these matters, Chu Luiwei planned to return to Zhaoyu Hall first. Although her status was different from before, she still lived in her previous palace. Just as she reached the entrance of Zhaoyu Hall, she saw a familiar figure. Chang Wanzhou. He seemed to be waiting for her. When he heard her footsteps, he raised his head and looked over. Chu Luiwei was a little surprised and walked over. Xiao Zhou, why are you back so soon? Previously, she had asked Chang Wanzhou to do her a favor, to return to country Yaochen and bring Chu Ning over. When she left Yaochen, Chu Ning only knew that she came to the Tianling dynasty with Mu Qinghe, but she didn't know that she came back for revenge. Naturally, she didn't know her true identity either. Now that the dust had settled, she planned to invite Chu Ning over for a reunion and tell him the truth. The previous Chu Luiwei was already dead, and the one living in this body had long been replaced by her. Even though it was too cruel for a father to say this, it was unavoidable. Now that she had regained her identity in Tianling, she could no longer pretend to be Chu Luiwei. She had already thought it through. As long as Chu Ning was willing, she would be his daughter for the rest of her life. Whether he wanted to stay in Xiling or return to Yaochen in the end, she would respect his choice and do her best to accompany and take care of him. After her rebirth, although she had only been with Chu Ning for less than a year, she had long regarded Chu Ning as her real father. Chu Luiwei only realized that Chang Wanzhou's expression was a little strange when she walked up to him. She suddenly felt a sense of unease. Then she heard Chang Wanzhou say, "Lord Chu Ning is missing." There was dead silence in the study of Zhaoyu Hall. Chu Luiwei sat at the head of the table while Chang Wanzhou stood 5 steps in front of her. The air was so cold that it seemed to be freezing inch by inch. In that case, he was already missing when you arrived at the imperial capital of Yaochen? Chang Wanzhou nodded. I asked around, and they all said that Lord Chu Ning went to Tianling alone a month ago. They said that he received your letter. I heard that many people were envious. However, I went to Heaven's Canopy to check, and there was no trace of Lord Chu Ning. Although Chang Wanzhou had never seen Chu Ning before, Chu Luiwei had drawn a portrait for him long ago. As long as he saw him, he would definitely recognize him at a glance. Moreover, he was powerful and agile. He also had many trump cards. Even if he acted alone, Chu Luiwei could rest assured. She thought that everything was arranged properly, but she never expected that Chu Ning was no longer in Yaochen. I never wrote a letter to father asking him to come to Xiling. Chu Luiwei's face was cold as if covered with a thin layer of frost. If this rumor was true, then who was the one who sent the letter to him? If this rumor was false, it would be even more troublesome. It meant that they didn't even know where Chu Ning went. The world was so big. Finding a person was like finding a needle in a haystack. Chu Luiwei frowned, and her mind raced. Call Qi Han over. The moment Qi Han entered the room, he felt that the atmosphere was a little strange. Your Highness. He cupped his fists and bowed respectfully. Chu Luiwei didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, Qi Han, you've been in charge of the letters between father and I, right? Qi Han was stunned and immediately said, yes. Other than the first letter I wrote to father to tell him that I'm safe, I didn't write a second one. Has there been a letter from father? Chu Luiwei paused and tapped her fingers on the table. According to the news that Xiao Zhou found out, father had already set off for West Hill a month ago because he received my letter. However, there was no trace of him until now. When Qi Han heard this, he also realized the seriousness of the matter. He pondered carefully for a while. There's no... Just as he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression froze. Previously, Miss Mu's father and mother had written a letter, and this subordinate had passed it to young Master Jian. Is there anything written in that letter? Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, then got up and walked outside. Chu Luiyue was extremely fast and headed straight for Dragon Teeth Mountain. When she reached the foot of the mountain, the disciple on guard saw someone coming and was about to stop her when she took off her hood, revealing a gorgeous face. Where's Jian Fengqi? Chu Luiyue had been here before. In addition to the Wanzheng competition and the sect meeting, many people knew her. Recently, because of her shocking identity, everyone in Xiling was talking about her. They didn't expect her to suddenly appear here at this time. Greetings, Your Highness. The two hurriedly bowed, but halfway through, they remembered that she was now an emperor and quickly changed their greetings. Young Master is on the mountain today. I'll take you there. No need. I'll go personally. Chu Luiyue said and hurried up the mountain. When she was halfway up the mountain, she happened to meet Mu Hongyu. When she saw Chu Luiyue, Mu Hongyu was pleasantly surprised. Luiyue, why are you here? She rushed over and was about to pounce on Chu Luiyue when she hurriedly stopped. She had almost forgotten that Lu Yu was no longer Lu Yu. Chu Luiyue grabbed her hand. In the letter that your father and mother sent you, did they mention my father? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 907. Mu Hongyu was stunned. I think it was mentioned. Wait a minute. As she spoke, she rummaged through her interspatial ring and took out a letter after a short while. She had always been very careful with the letters from Yao Chen. This letter was handed to me by young master a few days ago. As Mu Hongyu spoke, she handed the letter over. It only mentioned one sentence. Chu Luiyue opened the letter and skimmed through it. As expected, she saw a sentence at the end. It said that Chu Ning had received her letter and was planning to go to the West Hill to reunite with her. During that period of time, Mu Hongyu's parents had been staying in the capital. When they heard the news, they were very envious. They wanted to come and see Mu Hongyu, but after considering many factors, they couldn't go together. Chu Luiyue looked at the date. It was indeed a month ago. She frowned. The distance between the capital of Yaochen and the Tianling West Hill was more than tens of thousands of miles. Most importantly, there was also the Heaven's Canopy. What kind of news did father receive to come to the West Hill so decisively? One had to know that with his strength, if no one led him, it would be impossible for him to find those teleportation arrays, let alone reach them safely. It was impossible for him not to understand these principles. But he still did it. Was it because he was confident, or because someone had helped him, or was he coerced? So much time had passed. I wonder how father is doing. Seeing Chu Luiyue's grave expression, Mu Hongyu also sensed that something was wrong. What's wrong? Is there a problem with uncle? Chu Luiyue briefly explained the matter to her. Mu Hongyu said in surprise. You didn't ask him to come? I thought you really wrote a letter to invite him. When she received the letter, it was right after Chu Luiyue announced his identity. At that time, she was still shocked that Chu Luiyue was actually Shang Guanyu, so when she saw the letter, she naturally thought that Chu Luiyue had already made preparations and planned to bring Chu Ning over after everything was settled. But now, it seemed that this was not the case at all. Chu Luiyue's hand gripped the letter tightly. His brows furrowed as his mind raced. It was obvious that someone had deliberately used her name to make a move on her father. But who could it be? To be able to do this, the person must be someone from Heaven's Canopy. More importantly, the person must know her very well. Otherwise, the other party would never have thought of making a move on his father's side. Why was the other party doing this? Threatening her? But until now, she didn't seem to have received any news. If she hadn't sent Chang Wanzhou to Yao Chen this time, who knew when she would have found out about her father's disappearance? Why are you guys standing here? Just as the two of them fell silent, Jian Fengqi suddenly arrived. He waved the fan in his hand and walked over with a charming smile. However, his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue and sized her up carefully, as if he had never seen her before. When he got closer, he put away his fan, cupped his fists, and bowed slightly. "Greetings, Your Majesty." He really didn't expect that Shangguan Yu wasn't dead back then and had even returned with another identity. No wonder he always felt that Chu Luiwei was very familiar. So it was her. Now that he saw her again, his mood was indeed very strange. Seeing that the two of them seemed a little serious, Chu Luiwei was still holding the letter he had given to Mu Hongyu. It seemed like something had happened? What's going on? Jian Fengqi's gaze quickly scanned the duo's faces as he asked. Chu Luiwei returned the letter to Mu Hongyu and briefly explained what had happened. Jian Fengqi gradually frowned and tapped his hand with the bone fan. "After you returned to West Hill, you have indeed offended many people, but there shouldn't be many who would think of harming Lord Chu Ning, right?" Although Chu Luiwei had now ascended the throne, Jian Fengqi had always been bold and unrestrained. He had always been used to being free and unrestrained in front of her, so his words were still as unrestrained as before. Chu Luiwei didn't mind and nodded slightly. "I thought that there would be some clues in this letter, but..." The content of the letter was similar to the information that Chang Wanzhou had found out. There weren't any more clues. "Don't you have any way to find Lord Chu Ning?" Jian Fengqi asked curiously. Based on her usual prudence and intelligence, she should have been prepared for this. Moreover, when she left the imperial capital and went to West Hill, which was thousands of miles away, she should have been more careful in this regard. Chu Luiwei shook her head. "It's too far away." She had indeed left something with Chu Ning so that it would be convenient for them to confirm each other's location and safety. However, the two of them were so far away now, how could they detect each other? "Then the current solution is to try our best to find him." Jian Fengqi pondered for a moment. "I'm afraid this matter shouldn't be made public." To the current Chu Luiwei, this matter could be said to be both simple and difficult at the same time. Now that she had regained her identity and the entire Tianling was under her control, it wasn't difficult for her to send someone to find the whereabouts of a person. However, the key was that Chu Ning's identity was somewhat special. He was the biological father of Chu Liuyue's body. Chu Liuyue's identity was different from before. Moreover, Shangguan Yu had regained consciousness and was living well in the palace. Thus, Chu Ning's existence became a little awkward. "I've already sent someone to look for him in private, but the world is so big, and without any clues, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack." Seeing her worried expression, Mu Hongyu couldn't help but pat her hand gently. "Lu, don't worry. Uncle is a good person, and nothing will happen to him." Chu Luiwei sighed softly. "I hope so." Jian Fengqi looked at the two of them overlapping hands at the side, and his eyes flickered slightly. Shangguan Yu was indeed different from before. In the past, when she was the empress, although she was very amiable, she always carried a faint aura of alienation and nobility. Actually, it wasn't intentional. It was because she was too outstanding from the moment she was born, which caused her to have an indescribable sense of loneliness. Not to mention others, almost none of the children in the Tianling royal family were very close to her. Everyone subconsciously looked up to her, so naturally, they distanced themselves from her. Perhaps it was because of this that she was so good to Shangguan Wan, who was closer to her back then. Even Mu Qinghe later, after returning from the tribulation, her personality had obviously changed a little. She had the most trusted friends and many things that she didn't have before. She seemed to have become a lot more real. Thinking of this, Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment before finally asking, "Have you seen Mu Qinghe?" Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 908. Chu Liuyue's eyelashes fluttered slightly as she looked up at him. "Not yet. What's the matter?" "It's nothing. I was just asking casually." Jian Fengqi clenched his fist and coughed against his lips. "I remember that you seem to have a good relationship with Mu Qinghe?" Chu Luiwei raised her eyebrows and asked. Jian Fengqi pouted in his heart. She kept saying, when she was talking to Mu Hongyu, and she sounded so affectionate. She addressed him as I, the moment she spoke to him. Was she afraid that he wouldn't remember her current identity? After all, he had helped her a lot in the past. Why was she treating him differently now? However, he didn't dare to say this out loud. Your Majesty remembered wrongly. Jian Fengqi averted his gaze and looked away. Isn't your Majesty the clearest about our relationship back then? Chu Liuyue's lips curved up. Yes, I still remember that when Hong Yu's mother fell ill, Mu Qinghe directly asked you to go to Yaochen to help. If the two of them didn't have a strong relationship, how could someone like Jian Fengqi travel so far to help treat someone's illness? Later on, Mu Qinghe directly entrusted her to Jian Fengqi and asked him to bring her back to Xiling. It was obvious that the two of them had a lot of private dealings and trusted each other very much. Wasn't it too late to say that their relationship wasn't good now? Jian Fengqi's face stiffened for a moment. How could he forget? Chu Liyue also knew about those things back then. He remembered them clearly. Seeing that he couldn't deny it, Jian Fengqi could only speak vaguely. If your Majesty really wants to put it this way, there's nothing wrong with that. Mu Qinghe is the deputy commander of the Black Cavalry after all. His status isn't low and he holds great power. Isn't it normal for me to have a lot of dealings with him? Chu Liuyue's smile deepened. It would have been fine if Jian Fengqi hadn't said that, but he did, which proved that he had a guilty conscience. She said slowly, that's right. Oh, so that's how it is. But when I was the Empress concubine, didn't I have a higher status than him? Didn't you still not give me any face? Why did she suddenly change her temperament? Jian Fengqi choked. It was rare for him to be at a loss for words. If that's the case, then follow me to Mu Clan. Chu Liyue lifted his chin slightly. It just so happens that I have a lot of questions to ask you all. Jian Fengqi was filled with regret when he arrived at Mu Mansion and looked at the familiar door. Why couldn't he restrain himself from talking too much? If he hadn't taken the initiative to bring this up, he definitely wouldn't have been forcefully brought here. The Black Cavalry was still in charge of guarding Mu Mansion, but the previous batch of people who were Mu Qinghe's confidants had all been replaced. The guards standing in front of the door were shocked when they saw the two of them. They were about to salute when Chu Liyue waved his hand. Where's Mu Qinghe? One of the guards hurriedly said, Vice President Mu. He's been in the mansion all this time. Lord Shijing is also here. Previously, Chu Liyue sent Shijing to escort Mu Qinghe back, and Shijing had been staying here since then. Mu Qinghe's cultivation hadn't been destroyed, and only people at Shijing's level could suppress him. Chu Liyue nodded slightly and walked straight in. Jian Fengqi was struggling in his heart and didn't want to continue forward. Then, he saw Chu Liyue turn around and glance at him. Jian Fengqi's heart trembled, and he finally followed him obediently. As soon as they entered the inner courtyard, Shijing heard the noise and came out directly. Your Highness. The 13 Yu guards were directly under Chu Liyue, so although she was now in power, they were still used to calling her Your Highness. Chu Liyue was very direct. I brought Hong Yao and young Master Jian to see Mu Qinghe. Jian Fengqi. Shijing glanced at Jian Fengqi in surprise. It was not strange for Her Highness and Hong Yao to come, but what did it have to do with Jian Fengqi? But he didn't ask much. Mu Qinghe is now in the training field in the backyard. Although Mu Qinghe was imprisoned in Mu Mansion and was not allowed to go out, she was relatively free here. Anyway, barriers and Xian formations had already been set up outside, so Mu Qinghe couldn't escape. When they came to the training field, Chu Liyue saw Mu Qinghe practicing swordsmanship on the empty training field at a glance. Hearing the sound, he stopped and looked back. When he saw Chu Liyue, a trace of fluctuation flashed in his eyes, but he quickly calmed down and returned to his usual indifferent calmness. Hong Yao flapped its wings and flew out. It hesitated in front of Chu Liyue, looking at Mu Qinghe and then at Chu Liyue. It looked very pitiful. Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. Okay, she's your master after all. Go if you want to. When Hong Yao heard this, it happily rubbed itself against her face and then flew towards Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe only saw a blue shadow coming straight to her, and a moment of hesitation appeared on her face. Now that Hong Yao could follow her, it couldn't be better. If she had an intimate relationship with him, it didn't seem too good. However, Hong Yao had been very worried about her these days. At this time, it finally saw her, so it rushed straight to her. How could it care about anything else? It directly bumped into Mu Qinghe's arms. Mu Qinghe had no choice but to catch it and pat its head gently. Hong Yao's eyes were red, and it almost cried again, but fortunately, it stopped in time. Mu Qinghe glanced at it with a complicated look. Chu Luiwei asked him to stay in the name of Hong Yao. Of course, it was just a superficial excuse. She would never let go of anyone who betrayed her easily. Logically speaking, he should have been killed on the same day. However, no. She spared his life and didn't even give him any punishment. She just put him under house arrest in Mu Mansion. And here, except for the fact that he couldn't move freely and the people around him no longer obeyed his orders, everything else seemed to be the same as before. He vaguely guessed Chu Liyue's plan, but she didn't come after waiting for several days. Until today. Moreover, she brought Jian Fengqi with her. Mu Qinghe's gaze stopped on Jian Fengqi for a moment. Jian Fengqi instantly felt that there was a dagger at his back, and he couldn't wait to run away. He had always been thick-skinned and rarely felt like this. He only felt that every minute and every second of staying here was very unbearable. He really didn't bring Chu Luiwei here on purpose. I left West Hill for 2 years. Chu Luiwei said lightly. In West Hill City, things have changed. I came here today to ask, when did the two of you become so close to each other? Back then, because Jian Fengqi was too presumptuous and flamboyant, Mu Qinghe had a lot of conflicts with him. Now, in the blink of an eye, the two of them seemed to have turned from enemies to friends. She really didn't believe that there was nothing going on here. Asked Chu Luiwei with a smile as she sat down on a chair at the side. Qinghe, you go first. Digression. The 5th update is a little late, but it was released before 1 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 909. Mu Qinghe was taken aback by the sudden shout, and he looked at the woman not far away. She was sitting there leisurely. Her clothes were very simple, but she still had a noble aura. She still had a smile on her youthful face, and her eyes were as bright as stars. She looked just like she did many years ago. However, she called him by his name in such a relaxed tone, as if the grudges of the past few years didn't exist at all. Mu Qinghe slowly clenched his fists in his sleeves and lowered his eyes. It's just a normal meeting. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry. Mu Qinghe only gave a short answer. Then, he closed his mouth and didn't seem to have any intention of explaining. Jian Fengqi glanced at him as if he wanted to say something. He knitted his brows slightly, and hesitation flashed across his eyes. Even now, he still doesn't want to say anything. In fact, what Chu Luiwei asked was also what he wanted to ask. When the Imperial Ancestral Hall burned for a day and a night, even he was alarmed and rushed to the palace. In the end, Mu Qinghe was even later than him. Even he could see that there was something wrong with the princess's death. However, Mu Qinghe didn't express any objections from the beginning to the end. If it weren't for some things that happened later, Jian Fengqi would almost believe that he had completely betrayed Shangguanyu. If he was on Jiang Yuqing's side in the past because he cared about the big picture, now that Jiang Yuqing and Shangguanyu had been destroyed, what else could he say? Jian Fengqi really didn't understand. He wanted to help explain, but in fact, he didn't know much. Mu Qinghe was the only one who knew the reason for many of the things he did. If others said anything, it would only complicate the situation. What do you think? Chu Luiwei didn't seem surprised by Mu Qinghe's answer. He shrugged and looked at Jian Fengqi. Jian Fengqi's eyebrows twitched. It was just a small quarrel in the past. Come to think of it, there wasn't much conflict. Chu Luiwei smiled faintly, but his eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Jian Fengqi's words were stuck in his throat, and he couldn't say anything. He could not help but look at Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe lowered her head. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he raised his head again and calmly said, His Majesty sent out 3 requests for help that day, right? Chu Luiwei slowly sat up straight and stared at him. Mu Qinghe put one hand behind her back and slowly clenched it, but her expression was calm. Those 3 messages were intercepted by me. It was me who cut off His Majesty's last chance of survival that day. It was already the middle of June, and the weather was a little hot. People came and went on the streets, and it was very lively. Rong Xiu walked alone on the street. Because he wore a hood and restrained his aura, he didn't attract much attention. Most of the people around were still talking about her. Rong Xiu walked forward and listened to the discussions of the people around him. Every time he heard those people's exclamations of surprise and admiration, his thin scarlet lips would curl slightly. She could always do what she wanted to do. It wasn't that he didn't want to come and help, but in the end he still felt that it was better for her to give it her all. It was best for her to take back what she had lost. It was best for her to take revenge on her own. Only then could she completely wash away all the pain she had suffered. As for him, all he had to do was pass the knife to her whenever she needed it. Of course, the knife had to be fast enough. Just as he was thinking of this, he suddenly felt his surroundings darken. He raised his head to take a look and found that the sky that was previously clear and boundless was now suddenly filled with dark clouds and darkening. Soon, raindrops fell from his forehead. It was cold. He was walking in the direction of the 100 Herbs building, but he didn't expect that the weather would change halfway. The rain soon became heavier. The peddlers packed up and left one after another. White mist gradually appeared on the bluestone. There was only a curtain of rain between heaven and earth. Rong Xiu frowned slightly, and there was a deep look in his eyes. Then, he turned around and walked in another direction. The tall figure of the man quickly disappeared in the rain. After Chu Luiyue walked out of the Mu mansion alone, she walked aimlessly on the street. In her mind, she kept recalling what Mu Qing has said just now. He admitted it. He said that he did it. What else did he say? Oh, right, he said that he was originally Jianghu Qing's man. So, his betrayal was actually not a betrayal. It turned out that the truth was like this. Countless scenes flashed before her eyes. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. The wind gradually rose, and the surrounding sky quickly darkened. She glanced up at him. It was stuffy, gloomy, and cold. She had already forgotten what kind of expression she had after hearing those words, and what kind of answer she gave. She didn't even know how she walked out of the Mu mansion. Suddenly she felt a furry touch. It was Dumpling squatting on her shoulder, gently rubbing her face. Chu Luiyue shook her head. Dumpling, don't worry. I'm fine. She probably left hope for herself, thinking, but in this world, there weren't so many thinking. Chu Luiyue looked at the sky, and there was rain dripping. In the blink of an eye, it sped up, connecting the sky and the earth into lines. Chu Luiyue moved and was about to go back, but she suddenly felt a cold aura rushing toward her from the distance in the rain. She suddenly looked up. Alarm bells rang in her heart. A bluish-purple ball of light broke through the air. It was heading straight for her face. She staggered her feet and was about to make a move when she suddenly felt someone approaching her from behind quickly and grabbing her waist. At the same time, a silver blade of light flew out. It collided with the ball of light. It was as if a transparent barrier had appeared around him, and all the fluctuations were blocked outside. An extremely familiar cold fragrance hit her, and Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly beat faster. She turned around and saw that the person who came had a noble appearance and an astonishing aura. It was Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu? Why are you here? Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. Rong Xiu hugged her tighter, and his other hand held a black umbrella. His voice was low and lazy. It's raining. I'm here to hold the umbrella for you. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. It's just a small toy, Rong Xiu said lightly. Chu Luiyue didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Rong Xiu seemed to have recognized the origin of that thing, and there was a hint of coldness in his tone. Chu Luiyue gave Dumpling a look. Dumpling flew out and picked up the thing. Rong Xiu glanced at Dumpling, his eyes cold. Dumpling shuddered. Its strong desire to live made its wings tremble slightly, and it almost threw the thing out. Withstanding the huge pressure, it finally handed the thing to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand and was about to receive it when Rong Xiu, who was beside her, grabbed her hand. At the same time, A force flew out and hit the item. Bang! With a crisp sound, the thing cracked open. Then, a piece of paper flew out and unfolded automatically. It seemed to be a piece of white rice paper that was casually cut, but it floated in midair and didn't get stained by the raindrops at all. It was as if there was an invisible barrier around it. There were only 2 lines of words on that piece of paper. The first line was, "Shangguan Yu, congratulations." The second line was, "Your father is doing very well at I's place, don't miss him. We will meet again in a month's time." Just as Chu Luiwei finished reading, that piece of paper quickly combusted and turned into ashes, disappearing without a trace. Other than the faint smell of burning that filled the air, it was as if nothing had happened. But Chu Luiwei suddenly opened her eyes wide, and her heart was filled with shock. Because she had seen the handwriting on that piece of paper before. Back then, she had received a letter from Heaven's Canopy, and that letter had half a Xian formation as a seal. She had drawn the remaining half of the Xian formation before opening the letter. And that letter had written, "Shangguan Yu, long time no see." At that time, she hadn't told anyone about her identity, so after receiving that letter, she had thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't figure out who wrote the letter. After coming to Xiling, she had been busy with various things and had forgotten about this matter for a while. Until today, when she saw that piece of paper again, it must have been written by the same person, and the other party had obviously known about her identity a long time ago. It was even possible that the other party knew everything about her like the back of their hand. Needless to say, this congratulations was referring to her ascension to the throne. And her father was also deliberately taken away by the other party. Chu Luiwei frowned. This person, who exactly was it? At first, she thought that it was someone from the Tianling dynasty, but now it seemed that it wasn't the case. To be able to call himself I, and have such means, it was very likely that he came from outside the Tianling dynasty. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint flashed across the corner of his eyes. She was really haunting him. Chu Luiwei suddenly turned her head and looked at Rong Xiu. "You know who this is?" She had an inexplicable intuition that Rong Xiu seemed to know more than she expected. She didn't know where this feeling came from, but judging from Rong Xiu's reaction just now, it seemed that her guess was right. Rong Xiu's thin red lips moved slightly. Just as he was about to speak, a shout came from the corner of the street behind them. "Your Highness!" It was 13's voice. Chu Luiwei turned around and saw a slender young man running toward them quickly. His movements were nimble and free. It seemed that he didn't move much, but he was already in front of them. 13 came in the rain, but he was surrounded by a layer of enchantment, so he wasn't worried about getting wet. Because he was still young, Chu Luiwei almost never assigned tasks to 13. She only let him focus on cultivation. This also allowed 13 to come and go freely both inside and outside the palace. Today, he happened to meet Shangguan Yu. When he heard that it was related to his master, he immediately agreed and left the palace to look for him. When he was still a short distance away from Chu Luiwei, 13 shouted excitedly, "Your Highness, the retired emperor was worried that you would be out alone for too long, so he asked me to send you an umbrella and take you back to the palace. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 9:11. Suddenly, 13's voice stopped abruptly, and he stopped in his tracks. He looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Someone was holding an umbrella for Her Highness. More importantly, he was hugging Her Highness. With such an intimate gesture, anyone could tell that the relationship between the two was not ordinary. "Who are you?" 13 had come happily to bring Chu Luiwei back to the palace, but when he saw this scene, he felt uncomfortable. Without waiting for Chu Luiwei to speak, Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and said calmly, "I'm Yu's fiancé." 13's eyes widened in shock, and his mouth dropped open. "You're Her Highness's fiancé? Didn't Her Highness just settle Jianghu and Shangguan Wan? How did she suddenly have a fiancé?" Because 13 was young, no one told him about this, so he was especially shocked at first glance. Chu Luiwei was thinking, what did 13 say just now? He seemed to have mentioned the retired emperor? Based on Rong Xiu's intelligence, he would have sensed something wrong with this sentence and guessed her identity. You said just now, who asked you to bring you back? Sure enough, Rong Xiu spoke casually and directly. Chu Liyue's eyebrows twitched. 13 was about to reply, but he saw that there was something wrong with Her Highness's eyes, so he covered his mouth. Rong Xiu, I have something to tell you. Chu Liyue originally wanted to find a suitable time to tell him everything, but she didn't expect that the moment the two of them met she had no choice but to say it now. Rong Xiu looked down at her. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face, but there was an undetectable trace of a smile at the corner of his lips. Was she embarrassed that she had not been honest with him about those things before? Rong Xiu's voice was low. This low rhetorical question seemed to come from his chest, pressing tightly against his heart and brushing past his eardrums. It was pleasing to the ear and numbing. Chu Liyue blushed slightly, but she held his hand gently and firmly, their fingers intertwined. Come with me. 6 Cloud Street. Chu Estate. The rain had just stopped, and in the quiet and leisurely courtyard, there was already a shallow accumulation of rainwater. Water droplets continuously dripped from the eaves and fell into it, creating a circle of ripples. The air after the rain was moist and sweet. 13 stood outside the door, waiting anxiously and impatiently. From time to time, he would glance at the tightly shut door. Her Highness and that man had been in there for a long time and still hadn't come out. From His Highness's words, it seemed that he wanted to explain something to that man. However, His Highness was of noble birth and was decisive in killing. Since when did he need to explain so much to others? Most importantly, that man was actually Her Highness' fiancé. 13 scratched his head. 7th brother and the others didn't mention it before. He grew up in Shilin City and was very sure that the man was definitely not from Shilin City. However, judging from the aura around him, he shouldn't be underestimated. 13 looked inside again and scratched his head. This is what I wanted to tell you. In the room, Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu sat facing each other. Chu Liyue told him everything about her past life and current life. I am Chu Liyue from the Empire of Yaoqin, and also from the Shanghai Yu of the Tianling dynasty. She looked at Rong Xiu and said word by word seriously. Previously, I only said that there was an enemy of mine in Shilin City, but I didn't tell you everything clearly because, at that time, I wasn't sure if I could successfully complete what I wanted to do. But now, everything has been settled. I originally wanted to find an opportunity to tell you, but I didn't expect it to happen today. Chu Liyue took a deep breath. Rong Xiu, this is the real me. After saying that, Chu Liyue fell silent and waited quietly for Rong Xiu's reaction. However, unexpectedly, Rong Xiu's face didn't show any shock or surprise. Instead, there was a hint of tenderness in his eyes. He reached out and held her hand tightly. His fingers gently rubbed the back of her hand a few times. Does it hurt? Chu Liyue was stunned. What? Whether it was that day when you rejected me or everything that happened after that, Majesty must have suffered a lot, right? Rong Xiu looked at her, his eyes deep. He was waiting for her to tell him everything personally, but to her, it was undoubtedly exposing her own scars. Knowing that she had suffered a lot was also a kind of torture for him. Chu Liyue was stunned, but her eyes suddenly became hot. Rong Xiu, you are not angry that I lied to you? Although she didn't mean to deceive him, she had hidden too many things after all. Rong Xiu actually didn't care at all? Hearing that, Rong Xiu shook his head gently, smiled slightly, and sighed softly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I have the energy to be angry? Chu Liyue didn't expect Rong Xiu to have such a reaction. In the next moment, Rong Xiu leaned closer and sucked a teardrop from the corner of her eye. Promise me that in the future, don't shoulder anything by yourself. I'll always be there. The previous uneasiness and guilt all disappeared at this moment, and all of it turned into grievances and poured out in torrents. Suddenly, as if the heavy armor had been removed, her whole body relaxed. The suffering and torture that she had experienced in the past seemed to be not worth mentioning now. The heavens gave her pain and disaster, but they also gave her Rong Xiu. Chu Lue closed her eyes and buried her head in his shoulder, her voice muffled. After a while, there was a knock on the door outside. 13's somewhat nervous voice sounded. Your Highness? The rain has stopped for a long time. Should we go back to the palace? In fact, he didn't want to rush at this time, but there were still people waiting in the palace. Chu Liuyue's emotions gradually calmed down, and she pulled herself out of Rong Xiu's arms. She almost forgot that 13 was still waiting outside. I wanted to talk to you about something, but it seems that I can't today. Rong Xiu tidied her messy hair and gently rubbed her face. Chu Liyue looked at him, and a white light suddenly flashed in her mind. She vaguely felt that Rong Xiu seemed to want to talk to her about something important. And it was very likely that it was because of his previous identity as this son of God. But 13 was already rushing her, and it was indeed not convenient for her to stay for too long. Chu Liyue could only nod. Then you can stay here for the night. Tomorrow, she paused, raised her eyes slightly, and glanced at Rong Xiu again. Actually, father mentioned to me before that. He said that he wanted to see you. Rong Xiu understood and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Then I'll visit father-in-law tomorrow. Chu Liyue's face turned red, and then she was a little worried. Won't tomorrow be too soon? There should be some time to prepare for this kind of thing. Rong Xiu narrowed his eyes, and a smile flashed across his eyes. His wife didn't seem to have much confidence in her man. Then in 3 days. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:12. After saying goodbye to Rong Xiu, Chu Liyue returned to the palace with Shirsan. She was disappointed and worried, but after seeing Rong Xiu, she inexplicably felt relieved. It seemed that with him there was nothing to worry about. When she returned to Jianghu Hall, Shang Guanyu had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Chu Liyue return safely, Shang Guanyu breathed a sigh of relief. Ever since the incident 2 years ago, he had become much more sensitive. Chu Liyue had been away for too long, and he would be worried. Although he knew that she had a lot of trump cards now, it was normal for her parents to be worried. Chu Liyue thought about it and only told Shang Guanyu that Rong Xiu would come in 3 days. As for Chu Ning being held hostage, she did not mention much. Now she did not even know who the other party was, and telling her father would only make him more worried. However, Shang Guanyu became more and more curious about Rong Xiu. He wondered what kind of person could be so favored by her. Looking at Chu Liyue's sparkling eyes when she mentioned Rong Xiu, Shang Guanyu secretly made up his mind. As long as the boy was a good person, he would not object. Everything was for the sake of his daughter's happiness. After sending Shang Guanyu away, Chu Liyue returned to the study and sat down on a chair. She had experienced too many things today, which made her a little confused. Countless intertwined images flashed through her mind. After a long while, she opened her eyes. Her eyes were calm and serene. Taizu! Chu Liyue respectfully called out. A translucent phantom appeared in front of her. It was Taizu. Girl, what's bothering you? Taizu asked with one hand behind his back. Chu Liyue nodded. The black demon cave you mentioned before, what kind of existence is it? Hearing this, Taizu looked solemn and was silent for a while. Chu Liyue waited quietly. She had some understanding of the various dynasties in Heaven's Canopy. Some of them were stronger than the Tianling dynasty, while some were weaker. However, she had never heard of the Black Demon Cave. That's a hidden sect. Chu Liyue frowned slightly. Hidden sects. After a long while, Taizu spoke slowly. He let out a long sigh as if he was recalling something. 8,000 years ago, I was already at the peak of the 9th stage, just one step away from stepping into the deity realm. But even after 10 years, I still haven't succeeded. After that, I left Tianling and traveled the continent. Encountering the Black Demon Cave was actually a pure accident. The experts of the Black Demon Cave are as numerous as the clouds. Even when I was at my peak, I still couldn't be compared to them. I've seen the Black Demon Cave's people move mountains and fill seas. They're truly great experts. Even after 1,000 years, the things that happened back then were still deeply engraved in his mind, as fresh as yesterday. Chu Luiwei was also shocked. Taizu was the strongest expert of the Tianling dynasty in 1,000 years. If even he said so, then just how strong were the people of the Black Demon Cave? That day, although that person didn't have a physical body and was only left with a soul, the aura of the Black Demon Cave was extremely strong. That's why I recognized it at a glance. These hidden sects were very strong in cultivation, and most of them had their own distinctive characteristics. As long as you've seen them, you'll be able to recognize them at a glance. But these people are usually very arrogant and rarely enter the world, let alone participate in the disputes between dynasties. Taizu shook his head, looking puzzled. I don't know what's going on this time, Chu Luiwei pondered for a moment. That soul has been in Shangguanwan's body for a long time, at least a few years. According to what Shangguanwan said, she herself doesn't know when that person came into existence. But many of the things she did later were because she was bewitched by that person, including the matter of killing me. Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze. Actually, that day, I've already sensed that that person seems to be targeting you. Do you know why? Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. She still remembered clearly what that person had said at that time. It seemed to be because of the water droplet in her body. Ever since this water droplet transformed into an existence similar to the pill of origin in her body, it had been in this form almost all the time. But that day, under the influence of that man, it transformed into the appearance of a transparent book page again, and faintly felt like it was struggling to be pulled out. But if that person came for this, then why did he target her so early on? Before she died in her previous life, she didn't have this thing on her. It was only after she had been reborn that such an item suddenly appeared in her body out of nowhere. Even now, she still didn't know what it was. She shook her head. That person's attack failed, but he definitely won't give up. He'll come again in the future. Taizu said in a low voice. It's fine if he's alone, but if he implicates others, this was actually what he was most worried about. If the people of Black Demon Cave wanted to attack Tianling, even he might not be able to defeat them. Girl, the most important thing for you now is to improve your cultivation as soon as possible. This way, even if someone wants to trouble you in the future, you'll have the power to deal with it. Taizu frowned. You have too many treasures on you, and any one of them will attract the covetous eyes of countless people. You can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. The only way, and also the best way, was to become stronger by himself. Chu Luiwei nodded seriously. You will remember Taizu's teachings. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, Chu Luiwei got up and packed up, then went to the Yuanhe Palace. The Yuanhe Palace was Shangguan Yu's bedchamber. It was obvious that Shangguan Yu wanted to meet Rong Xiu as Rong Xiu's father by setting the venue here instead of the palace hall where the other officials would attend court. Although Shangguan Yu was now the emperor, in Shangguan Yu's eyes, whether this marriage could make her happy was the most important thing. Perhaps in the eyes of the world, an emperor's marriage was a matter of state first, followed by family affairs. But in Shangguan Yu's eyes, it was a matter of family first, followed by state affairs. Everywhere she passed, the palace servants bowed respectfully. But just as she walked out of the Yuanhe Palace, she saw someone standing there, as if waiting for someone. Hearing the movement, the person turned around. When he saw Chu Luiwei's face, a trace of excitement and joy appeared on the handsome young man's face. He took 2 quick steps forward. Your Majesty. Chu Luiwei looked at him strangely. Zhao Zicheng? Why are you here? This was the second son of the Zhao family, also a famous family in Xiling City. But he had left Xiling a few years ago, and she didn't expect him to come back today. Hearing her question, Zhao Zicheng's ears turned red. When I heard that your Majesty had returned, I rushed back day and night, hoping to see your Majesty. He seemed to be very nervous, but his face was full of hope and sincerity. Your Majesty, I'm here today to confess my feelings to you. Previously, because you chose Jianghu, I didn't say much and left Xiling. But this time, please give Zicheng a chance. The corner of Chu Luiwei's eyes twitched. Is he Confessing? On the day when I'm going to meet father with my fiancée? Digression, I suddenly found out that a friend of mine had a tumor, so I chatted with him for a long time. Everyone, take care of your health and have regular checkups. Sigh, I'll continue at 6. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:13. Zhao Zicheng didn't seem to notice anything wrong with Chu Liyue's expression and continued speaking. Because I know that your Majesty has been busy recently, Zicheng has been staying in the residence these few days and didn't dare to disturb you. Zhao Zicheng looked up and quickly glanced at the woman in front of him. His eyes were filled with unconcealable adoration, and his nervous heart was beating wildly. But Zicheng has admired your Majesty for many years. I'm afraid that if I don't say it this time, I won't have another chance in the future. Zhao Zicheng instantly felt much better after finally speaking his mind. However, his handsome face was stained with a tinge of red. His eyes were filled with hope and uneasiness as he looked at Chu Liyue as if he was waiting for her answer. Chu Liyue sighed inwardly. To be honest, Zhao Zicheng was very good. Although the Zhao family wasn't considered the top family in Xiling City, they were still officials of the Tianling dynasty for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. As the second son of the Zhao family's direct descendant, Zhao Zicheng's status was even more precious. Most importantly, he was an extremely outstanding mystic master genius. In the entire Xiling, except for Chu Liyue, almost no one could be compared to him. If Jian Fengqi was a genius who was only one step behind her in alchemy, then Zhao Zicheng was above mystic master level and could fight with her. When she was young, she cultivated with many elders of the imperial family. Jian Fengqi and Zhao Zicheng had been her study companions for a period of time. Unlike Jian Fengqi's arrogant and unbridled personality, Zhao Zicheng was more like a modest gentleman with an introverted and gentle personality. For so many years, everyone in Xiling City praised the second son of the Zhao family when they mentioned him. Even compared to Jianghu, he was definitely on par in all aspects. Zhao Zicheng, I remember that you are already 27 this year. Chu Liyue said. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment and nodded in confusion. That's right. At this age, you should have married and had children long ago. Chu Liyue said sincerely and calmly. You don't have to waste any more time on me. Zhao Zicheng's originally slightly red face turned white with a swish. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. Your Majesty, what do you mean? Chu Liyue shook his head. As smart as you are, there's no way you don't know what I mean. If that's the case, don't mention it again in the future. Please leave. With that, Chu Liyue prepared to leave. Zhao Zicheng only hesitated for a moment before he immediately blocked her way again. Your Majesty, Zicheng is sincerely seeking your hand in marriage. Zhao Zicheng tried hard to suppress the nervousness and embarrassment in his heart. Back then, because Jianghu beat me to it and you agreed to the engagement with him, I put away my thoughts and left the West Hill alone. Although it's uncomfortable, as long as you're happy, everything else doesn't matter. But now, he has betrayed you, and I am filled with regret. Missing it once is already a matter of life and death. I don't want the same thing to happen a second time. Zhao Zicheng was determined to come today. A few years ago, he left heartbroken, thinking that he had helped her, but he didn't expect that in the end, everything would be so absurd. When he heard that she had survived a great disaster and returned from a tribulation, he immediately rushed back. No matter what, he would definitely persevere to the end this time. Although he himself didn't care much about worldly possessions in terms of background, talent, and so on, he was confident that he was definitely one of the most suitable choices for her now. Chu Liyue felt a headache coming on. Zhao Zicheng had a cool and gentle personality, but when this kind of person was stubborn, even a few oxen couldn't pull him back. Zhao Zicheng, I have always understood your feelings. Chu Liyue thought about it, but still decided to tell him the truth. Since many years ago, even if you don't say it, I understand. Zhao Zicheng was actually a very honest person and didn't know how to hide his feelings. She wasn't stupid. They had spent a few years studying together, and later he entered the imperial court as an official. From time to time, they would see each other in the imperial court or at palace banquets. How could she not know his feelings? It was just that things like feelings could never be forced. Zhao Zicheng was stunned for a moment, and it took him a while to realize what she meant. Looking at the clear eyes of the woman in front of him, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. Although her appearance was slightly different from before, her eyebrows and eyes were still the familiar appearance in his memory. She was still her. These words were a clear rejection. But, he didn't want to give up just like that. "Can't you give me a chance?" Zhao Zicheng spoke with difficulty, as if something in his eyes would shatter at the slightest touch. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of forgetting and letting go of this person after so many years of thinking. If he could do it, he wouldn't be standing here today. Just one time and, no. A low and cold man's voice suddenly came from behind. Although the tone was light, there was a faint sharp pressure in the words. Zhao Zicheng turned around and saw a man in white. He didn't know when, but he had appeared not far behind him. The man looked to be in his early 20s. He was tall and wore a white robe. The breeze blew the corner of his robe, making him look like a banished immortal. But what was even more shocking was his appearance. His facial features were as if they were carefully carved and cast by the heavens. There wasn't a single spot that wasn't perfect. He was noble and unparalleled, but there was also a trace of demonic aura. Just by standing there, he could easily take away all the colors between heaven and earth. Even Zhao Zicheng had to admit that this person's appearance and aura was really something he had never seen before in his life. You are. Rong Xiu's thin scarlet lips curled into a faint smile. "I am Yu's fiancé, Rong Xiu." Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:14. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder. It smashed into Zhao Zicheng's heart. His mind went blank for a moment. What did you say? He was her fiancé. Didn't she just come back? When he looked back in shock, only to see the woman who had been distant and cold to him just now unconsciously smile after seeing the person who came. Thousands of stars seemed to shine in her eyes. At this moment, Zhao Zicheng's heart turned cold. Rong Xiu. Chu Luiwei didn't expect him to come so quickly and walked over. "Why are you here so early?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. "Since I want to meet my father-in-law, I naturally have to be early. Besides, if I came late, wouldn't I miss a good show?" Chu Luiwei glared at him. How could he joke with her at this time? She had clearly rejected him just now. Rong Xiu looked at her angry and coquettish expression and smiled slightly. His heart itched slightly and he wanted to hug her directly. But when he thought that this was the Tianling Palace and there were many palace servants around to serve them, he suppressed the urge and just held her hand. Seeing the two of them clasped hands, Zhao Zicheng finally reacted. He frowned subconsciously. Anyone could see that the two of them were very close. Fiancé, why hadn't he heard of it before? Zhao Zicheng had specially asked his father a few days ago to sound out Shangguanyu, but he didn't mention it at that time. Could it be someone she met in the past 2 years? If he remembered correctly, she had returned from an empire called Yaochen outside Heaven's Canopy. This man, you don't seem to be from West Hill. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath and tried to make himself look calm. Not to mention West Hill, even in the entire Tianling, there was no Rong family among the famous families. There was a high probability that it was from Yaochen. Chu Luiwei didn't want to say too much to Zhao Zicheng, so she said, "Father should be waiting for me. Father should be waiting inside, so I'll go in with Rong Xiu first. Second young Master Zhao, you should go back too." Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiu insistently. "Since you're Her Majesty's fiancé, there's nothing you can't say about your family background, right?" He was going to go against Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu looked at Chu Luiwei comfortingly and smiled. "I'm 7th Prince Yaochen Rong Xiu." He was indeed from of Yaochen's people. Of course. Of the ROF of course. Of the Tianling of the Tianling of the Emperor of the Emperors of The difference in status between the two of them was too great. Not to mention him, even the officials of the imperial court wouldn't agree to this marriage. Zhao Zicheng couldn't help but look at Chu Luiyue. Of course she knew this, but she was still so insistent. It was enough to prove that she was truly moved by this man. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists tightly, feeling extremely conflicted. In the early years, it was Jiang Yuqing who was one step ahead. Now there was Rong Xiu. It seemed that he was always a little short of success every time. He really couldn't take it lying down. I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Zhao Zicheng. Although Zhao Zicheng hadn't stayed in West Hill for the past few years, he hadn't resigned from his position. His journey had been smooth, and he had already become an assistant minister at such a young age. But in fact, this title was not worth mentioning compared to his aristocratic background. There were several assistant ministers of the Ministry of Rights, but there was only one second young master of the Zhao family. Zhao Zicheng had no intention of using his background to suppress others. He only wanted to use his official position to try and pressure the other party. When ordinary people heard this, it was inevitable that they would be surprised and in admiration. But after he finished speaking, the man opposite him only nodded with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care. Second young Master Zhao, I've heard of you. Chu Luiyue and Zhao Zicheng both looked at him in surprise. Chu Luiyue thought that Rong Xiu had only been to West Hill once before, and Zhao Zicheng wasn't here at that time. How could he have heard of Zhao Zicheng's name? Zhao Zicheng thought to himself, judging from this Rong Xiu's tone, he seems to know something about me, but why doesn't he care at all? Perhaps he doesn't know much about the situation in West Hill? If that's the case, it would explain his series of reactions. Zhao Zicheng took a deep breath. I have a few words that I would like to talk to young Master Rong alone. Is it convenient for you? Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows and nodded. Why not? Seeing that the atmosphere was getting strange, Chu Luiyue grabbed Rong Xiu. If you have something to say, say it here. It's most likely related to me. Why can't I listen? Zhao Zicheng looked at her hesitantly. Your Majesty, Rong Xiu and I are engaged. What can I not listen to? Second young Master Zhao, if you have something to say, please speak your mind. Rong Xiu blinked, and a faint smile flashed across his eyes. Well, it's rare to see her supporting me like this. It feels good? Zhao Zicheng's eyes dimmed for a moment. Even Jiang Yuqing back then, she didn't seem to have spoken up for me like this. She's protecting me like this. It's obvious that she's really in love. On the other hand, Rong Xiu was standing behind her, as if he was enjoying this woman's protection of him with a clear conscience. Zhao Zicheng suddenly became angry. If it's already like this, won't it be worse in the future? This marriage is not worth it to me. Zhao Zicheng's expression became much more serious. Since your Majesty has said so, I will not mince my words. Young Master Rong, if you are sincere to Her Majesty, then please leave her now and don't have anything to do with her anymore. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere suddenly turned cold. The space around them seemed to freeze inch by inch. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel an extremely cold aura spreading from Rong Xiu's body. For a moment, Zhao Zicheng felt an extremely dangerous killing intent. His heart suddenly skipped a beat. His hair stood on end. But in the blink of an eye, this feeling quickly disappeared without a trace. It was as if everything was just an illusion. Rong Xiu smiled, but his voice was so cold that it made one's heart tremble. What if I say no? Zhao Zicheng knew that he would definitely not agree after hearing this, so he wasn't discouraged and continued speaking. Perhaps you two were very close in the past, but now, as you can see, she is already the Tianling Emperor. She needs to marry someone of the same status, but you don't have this right. If you really like her and cherish her, then for her own good, you should cancel this marriage and leave. Don't tell me you don't know what self-awareness is? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 9:15. Chu Luiyue's expression turned cold. Zhao Zicheng, Rong Xiu held her hand and gave her a reassuring glance. Then he chuckled as if he didn't care about Zhao Zicheng's words and didn't show any anger at being provoked. If I can prove that I'm worthy of you, second young Master Zhao will take back your words and promise not to disturb you in the future. How about it? Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Rong Xiu to not only not be angry, but also take the initiative to say such a thing. He couldn't help but frown and ask in return, "Prove? What proof do you have?" Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent. He stood there, as ethereal and cold as a landscape painting, exuding an indescribable charm. "Whatever you can think of, just do it." His voice was light and nonchalant, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. This was the kind of confidence that could only come from a person with great strength. Zhao Zicheng's first reaction was that it was absurd. This Rong Xiu truly didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He even dared to say such a thing. Did he know what kind of existence the Tianling dynasty was? Any one of the people here might be able to easily crush him. This made Zhao Zicheng even more dissatisfied and indignant. Such an arrogant and domineering man didn't deserve to be with her. Even if she didn't like him, Zhao Zicheng, and chose other outstanding young talents, he had nothing to say. But this Rong Xiu couldn't do it. Zhao Zicheng clenched his fists and said, "All right, since you dare to face it head-on, this young master won't deliberately make things difficult for you. One's background can't be chosen, so there's no need to compare. As long as you can prove that you're outstanding enough. May I ask, young Master Rong, what kind of cultivation do you practice? Martial artist, mystic master, or celestial physician?" Rong Xiu raised his brows slightly. "May I know which one second young Master Zhao is best at?" Zhao Zicheng froze for a moment, then straightened his body and said with a slightly solemn expression, "Mystic Master." He actually dabbled in the other two fields, but comparatively speaking, his talent as a mystic master was the best. His cultivation as a mystic master was also the highest. "Then I'll be a mystic cultivator," Rong Xiu said indifferently. There was a moment of silence. After a moment, Zhao Zicheng opened his eyes slightly and asked in surprise and shock, "Mystic cultivator? Are you sure?" He had already said that he was best at being a Xian master, but Rong Xiu just had to choose this, "I'm sure." Of course, if second young Master Zhao wanted to compete in other aspects, Rong Xiu would naturally accompany him to the end. Rong Xiu's expression was calm and there was a hint of a smile on his lips. He seemed to be very patient. His reaction completely provoked Zhao Zicheng. "Good. That was a Xian master. If you can defeat me from now on, I will never get involved in these matters again. Also, from now on, stay away from you." Rong Xiu reminded. Zhao Zicheng choked. "All right." Hearing the answer, Rong Xiu nodded with satisfaction. Chu Luiwei glanced at Rong Xiu. "This is on purpose? Why do I feel that Rong Xiu deliberately induced Zhao Zicheng to say these words?" Zhao Zicheng composed himself. "In that case, let's make an appointment. Let's do it today." Before he finished speaking, a low and powerful voice came from not far away. They looked back and saw that Shang Guanyu had already walked out of Yuanhe Hall. The words just now came from his mouth. "Father!" Chu Luiwa shouted. Rong Xiu cupped his fists and bowed to Shang Guanyu. "Rong Xiu greets your Majesty." Zhao Zicheng didn't expect Shang Guanyu to appear at this time. Thinking that he seemed to have heard everything just now, he was a little nervous and also bowed. Shock flashed across Shang Guanyu's eyes as he sized Rong Xiu up, but there was also a tinge of admiration. He waited in Yuanhe Hall for a long time, but no one came. Later, he heard from the palace servants that a few people were quarreling outside, so he planned to come out and take a look. At first glance, he saw his baby Yu. Then, he turned his gaze and saw another man in white standing beside her. Seeing that the two were standing very close to each other, he had already guessed the identity of this person. Although he only saw the back of Rong Xiu just now, Shang Guanyu could still vaguely sense the noble and imposing aura of Rong Xiu. He was a little surprised. Even the ordinary children of the aristocratic families couldn't compare to such an imposing manner. He had been sitting on the throne for a long time, so he had an excellent eye for people. Rong Xiu exuded a noble aura that only a person of high status would have. He had seen Emperor Yaochen a few times, but he couldn't be compared to this person. He didn't seem like someone who could be raised by an existence like Emperor Yaochen. So you're Rong Xiu. Standing close to him and sizing him up, Shang Guanyu finally saw Rong Xiu's face clearly. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Isn't he too good-looking? Even he had to admit that he'd never seen such a peerlessly noble appearance that was like an immortal's in his life. Even Jianghu, who was famous for being the most handsome man in Xiling, paled in comparison to her instantly. In comparison, it was like a firefly competing with the sun and the moon. The contrast was simply tragic. With just one look, Shang Guanyu immediately understood why his daughter liked him. With such a face, he was probably a young girl who was in love. Her heart would be moved at the sight of him. If he hadn't eavesdropped for a while just now and felt that this man was quite responsible and courageous, Shang Guanyu almost suspected that his baby daughter was simply bewitched by this devilish face. Father, Rong Xiu and I were going to visit you, but we didn't expect to meet second young Master Zhao. We were delayed for a while. You won't be angry, right? Chu Luiyue blinked. Shang Guanyu laughed. He knew that she was speaking up for Rong Xiu, but he felt inexplicably unhappy when he saw how protective she was of Rong Xiu. Do you think your father is such a petty person? Zhao Zicheng's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. So they had made an appointment long ago? Then wouldn't he? Thinking of this, Zhao Zicheng suddenly felt even more nervous. Shang Guanyu looked at Zhao Zicheng and sighed in his heart. Although Zhao Zicheng was outstanding in all aspects, what could he do if you didn't like him? Back then, Zhao Zicheng left West Hill sadly because of the engagement between you and Jianghu. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't know. Now that Jianghu was defeated and imprisoned, Zhao Zicheng still had feelings for you, and specially came to ask for her hand in marriage. There was nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, he was still a step too late. Since you have made an appointment, there's no time like the present. Let's do it today. He also wanted to see how powerful Rong Xiu was. You had praised him before, but he still didn't quite believe it. Only when he saw it with his own eyes could he be sure. Coincidentally, there's a martial arts field behind Yuanhe Hall. Let's do it there. Since Shang Guanyu had said so, the rest of the people naturally wouldn't object. Everyone began to walk into Yuanhe Hall. Chu Luiyue pulled Rong Xiu's sleeve and whispered, Rong Xiu, when did you cultivate as a Xian master? Zhao Zicheng is very talented in this aspect. Can you do it? Mobile users, please browse for a more high-quality reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 9:16. When Rong Xiu heard this, his footsteps paused slightly. He glanced at her and raised his eyebrows slightly. A faint light flashed across his deep phoenix eyes. For some reason, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. It was extremely dangerous. He didn't open his mouth, but a voice as weak as a fly clearly entered her ears. Don't say such things in the future. Chu Luiyue blinked and vaguely felt that she had committed a huge taboo. What did I just say? Put your heart back in your stomach. Rong Xiu gave his wife a warning look. Your man is very good at everything. Chu Luiyue's face heated up slightly, and her ears burned a little. She immediately looked away and followed the crowd forward. TSK, wasn't she also worried about him? After all, they had known each other for so long, but she still didn't know that Rong Xiu was actually a mystic cultivator. Although she knew that Rong Xiu was very strong in the past, she had always thought that he was only a martial artist. Now that she was going to compete with Zhao Zicheng as a mystic cultivator, she really didn't have any confidence. Zhao Zicheng's talent in this aspect was only slightly weaker than hers. After so many years of diligent cultivation, it wasn't hard to imagine how powerful his cultivation had become as a mystic cultivator. Rong Xiu was actually so calm. However, a certain someone who had been warned by Yanjing naturally didn't dare to ask any more questions. Since he had such a reaction, he should have some confidence. Seeing Rong Xiu's calm and confident appearance as if he didn't take this matter seriously, Chu Luiyue, who was originally a little worried, gradually relaxed. This man seemed to have never needed her to worry about. Yuanhe Hall, martial arts training field in the backyard. Rong Xiao and Zhao Zicheng stood facing each other. Sheng Guanyu and Chu Luiyue sat below the field. Around them stood the black cavalry who were in charge of guarding. It was quiet all around. Everyone's gaze was focused on the two people on the field. Some were curious, while others were doubtful. Now, everyone here already knew that the man in white, Rong Xiao, was Her Majesty's fiancé. Since Zhao Zicheng failed to marry Her Majesty, the two of them decided to compete. Since this matter involved Chu Luiyue, it would naturally cause a huge commotion. At this moment, although everyone looked very calm on the surface, their hearts were already surging with waves. Outside the palace gates in the distance, some palace servants were huddled together, cautiously looking in this direction. I heard that the man in white was Her Majesty's fiancé in country Yaochen. I think he's the 7th prince of country Yaochen. Yaochen? Isn't that a vassal state of Tianling? Even though he is a prince, his status doesn't match His Majesty's. But such a graceful appearance is truly rare in the world. Previously, I thought that second young Master Zhao was quite good. However, I don't know why, but when I compare the two of them, I actually feel that second young Master Zhao is slightly inferior. These are all external things, they're not that important. Her Majesty's status is noble. Even if she agrees, I'm afraid the courtiers won't nod their heads easily. When second young Master Zhao left Xiling, he was already a level 7 mystic master. After a few years, I wonder how much he has improved. I'm afraid this duel is going to be difficult. Zhao Zicheng looked at Rong Xiao opposite him and cupped his fists. Please. Rong Xiao nodded indifferently. Seeing how calm he was, Zhao Zicheng frowned. I'll let him be arrogant for a while longer. When we really fight, he'll know what it means to say that there's always someone better than you. There are some people that a mere 7th prince of Yaochen can't obtain. Zhao Zicheng held his breath and focused. He slightly staggered his feet and raised his hand. A silver force as thick as a thumb instantly flew out from his palm. That force was extremely pure. It danced lightly in the wind, but it contained a powerful pressure. Then, Zhao Zicheng waved his hands. That force actually split into hundreds of forces in an instant. Moreover, each of them was the same thickness as the first one. The aura of each force was completely the same. To be able to gather these forces together and quickly split them up again, it was enough to prove that Zhao Zicheng's control of the force was already at the peak of perfection. Countless silver lines circled around his hands. They were like swimming fishes, swift and agile. Then, these lines began to intertwine and overlap, quickly forming a huge circular Xian formation. As the pattern on the Xian formation became more and more complex, Zhao Zicheng's aura also rose rapidly. In just a few breaths of time, the silver Xian formation was already so complicated that it was dazzling. Buzz. A heavy pressure spread out from the Xian formation. As it slowly rotated, the void at the edge of it was actually silently cut open by black spatial cracks. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the power of the Xian formation was. Sheng Guanyu was very surprised. He sat up slightly and stared at the Xian formation. I really didn't expect. Zhao Zicheng has already broken through to become a level 8 mystic master. With such pressure, he was definitely a level 8 mystic master. It could be seen that he had not slacked off in the past few years and had been cultivating with all his might. Calculating his age, he was not even 30 years old this year. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there were very few people who could break through to level 8 mystic master at this time. After saying that, Sheng Guanyu turned his gaze and looked at Rong Xiao opposite him. He was slightly stunned. Rong Xiao stood tall and slender with one hand behind his back, looking calm and composed. He actually hasn't moved yet? When Zhao Zicheng had already started and even the high-level Xian formation was about to be completed, Rong Xiao actually didn't react at all? Is he planning to give up directly? But even if his strength is not as good as Zhao Zicheng's, he should at least try his best, right? What does he mean by standing still like this? Sheng Guanyu couldn't help but frown. Chu Luiwei looked at this scene and felt very strange, but more than that, she was curious. To be honest, until now, she still didn't know what level Rong Xiu's strength was at. Moreover, today was a Mystic Master competition. She really wanted to see how strong Rong Xiu was in this aspect. Zhao Zicheng took in all of Rong Xiu's reactions. His mood, which was already bad, instantly became even worse. This scene looked like he was going all out, but Rong Xiu didn't care about it at all. Zhao Zicheng pursed his lips and injected another stream of force into the Xian formation. A huge figure appeared on the Xian formation. At first glance, it looked like a tiger. Startling tiger formation. Roar. Following this earth-shattering roar, the ferocious tiger suddenly leaped out and went straight for Rong Xiu. In the next moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of Rong Xiu. It was clearly a white lion. Its icy blue eyes stared coldly at the ferocious tiger phantom as it raised its paw indifferently. Swoosh! The white light was like a blade, and in an instant, it tore the incomparably ferocious phantom into pieces. Rong Xiu looked up, and his thin lips curved up as he smiled. This won't do. Let's change it to someone I can fight. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 917. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before the crowd could realize what had happened, they saw the white tiger illusion, which had an imposing aura, dissipate in an instant. At this moment, even the Xian formation started to crack. The originally complicated and powerful Xian formation was instantly covered with spiderweb-like cracks. Zhao Zicheng's heart sank as he quickly retreated. The moment he left his original spot, the huge silver Xian formation shattered instantly. Boom! With a loud bang, the Xian formation turned into countless dazzling rays of light that scattered in all directions. The terrifying impact wreaked havoc in all directions. Zhao Zicheng only felt a tightness in his chest, and the pressure on his shoulders was as heavy as 2 mountains. But at this moment he no longer had the mood to care about this. He only looked at the Rong Xiu in horror. How could this be? How could this be? The Rong Xiu didn't even make a move. He only sent out a magical beast and easily destroyed the Xian formation that he had painstakingly set up. And the Rong Xiu's words made him even more embarrassed. His face was red and white, and the blood in his chest was surging. He originally thought that he could easily finish off the other party with one move, but he didn't expect that he would be the one at a disadvantage in the end. He was shocked and anxious, and couldn't help but look at the white lion in front of the Rong Xiu. Its body was snow white, and only its eyes were ice blue. Its entire body carried a dense chill. Just by standing there quietly, the ground beneath it was already covered with a layer of frost. This is your contracted magical beast? Zhao Zicheng asked in disbelief. From the attack just now, this white lion's rank was at least 8th grade, or even higher. It wasn't that Zhao Zicheng had never seen a higher rank magical beast. After all, Chu Liyue's 9-colored heavenly pheasant was 9th grade. And in the next few years, when he was traveling outside, he was lucky enough to see it once or twice. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but the pressure and aura around this white lion seemed to be even stronger than the 9th grade magical beast he had seen before. Just as this absurd and terrifying thought appeared, Zhao Zicheng immediately extinguished it. Impossible. Any contract between a magical beast and a human had to be based on the conditions. Generally speaking, only when a cultivator was powerful enough would he be able to make a contract with a magical beast willingly. If this white lion was really that Rong Xiu's strength, Zhao Zicheng closed his eyes tightly, trying to get rid of these distracting thoughts, but his back was still drenched in cold sweat. Rong Xiu was probably much stronger than he had expected. Chu Luiwei was originally watching leisurely from the side. When he saw Xue Xue come out, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Judging from Xue Xue's attack just now, its strength was almost on par with a 9th grade magical beast. She remembered that when they first met, Xue Xue was indeed a high-level magical beast, but it was only around the 7th rank. How did it suddenly become so much stronger? One had to know that the grade of a magical beast was determined from birth. Only a very small number of magical beasts could increase their grade through continuous breakthroughs. And all of those magical beasts were existences with extremely powerful bloodlines. Moreover, even if Shui originally had this potential, it seemed a little impossible for it to break through to this realm in such a short time. Chu Luiwei touched his chin and narrowed his eyes. Could it be that Shui had deliberately hidden its strength in the past? Or it actually hadn't shown its true realm yet? At this moment, Rong Xiu chuckled and nodded. That's right. On this point, I think I should be worthy of you. Dead silence. Everyone present looked at Rong Xiu in shock and speechlessness. What did he mean by that? Now, in the entire Tianling, who didn't know that Chu Luiwei had returned from the death tribulation and ascended to the throne? And a divine beast was following by her side, the red-tailed red phoenix. Didn't Rong Xiu mean that his contracted magical beast was also a divine beast? This time, Shang Guanyu finally couldn't hold back and looked at Chu Luiwei. He actually contracted a divine beast? Why didn't you say before? Just this point alone was enough to earn him a lot of points. After all, in the entire Tianling dynasty, only Chu Luiwei had a divine beast. Chu Luiwei was speechless. She didn't know either. At this time, Shang Guanyu was still looking at the field, so he didn't notice Chu Luiwei's expression and stroked his beard. When did a prince from the empire of Yaochen become so powerful? No wonder he's so confident. Chu Luiwei was speechless. Actually, she wanted to ask more. In an instant, countless images appeared in her mind. She used to think that Shui was smart and cute, but she never thought that it was actually a divine beast. The key was that in her knowledge, there didn't seem to be a divine beast that looked like a white lion. Rong Xiu had never told her this. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Even Shui's identity and strength were so shocking. What about Rong Xiu? Zhao Zicheng never expected that Rong Xiu would casually summon a divine beast. Looking at the white lion, his face was still full of disbelief. A divine beast? What kind of person could make a contract with it? Didn't they say that Rong Xiu came from an ordinary background? Where did this divine beast come from? Zhao Zicheng faintly felt uneasy, but at this time, the bet had been set and the two sides had already started fighting. It was absolutely impossible to stop. He forced himself to calm down, adjust his breath, and began to reconstruct the Xian formation. Previously, he thought that he could win easily, so he didn't use his full strength in the first move. But now, they had to be prepared for battle. Just as Zhao Zicheng began to construct the second Xian formation, a few figures suddenly rushed from the sky outside the palace gate. Your Majesty! Chu Luiwei and Shang Guanyu turned their heads at the same time and saw Elder Chen Ku and a few others coming together. Elder Chen Ku was the first to land. He quickly ran to Chu Luiwei and Shang Guanyu and asked nervously, Your Majesty, what happened here? Why was there such a big commotion just now? A few days ago, a big event had just happened in the palace, and their minds were still in a highly sensitive period. Therefore, when they heard the commotion just now, they immediately rushed over, thinking that it was another fight. After asking, Elder Chen Ku and a few others quickly looked around, but found that there was nothing wrong here. On the training field next to them, there were two people confronting each other. Nothing, it's just these two guys fighting. Shang Guanyu waved his hand, indicating that they didn't need to be nervous. Elder Chen Ku and a few others heaved a sigh of relief. But when they saw the faces of the two people, they were shocked again. What's going on? One of them was Zhao Zicheng. Judging from his breath, the commotion just now was caused by him. And the man in white opposite him, a few people wanted to ask, but they felt that the atmosphere was not right, so they all kept quiet and looked at the field. At this time, Zhao Zicheng's second Xian formation was completed. The pressure on it was obviously much stronger than before. He took a deep breath and used all his strength to send out the Xian formation. One Yang formation. Digression, 6 o'clock. Then he just found that a few chapters were blocked. I'll change the text. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.